I thought I was being careful. I had the lies timed, the messages deleted, the story straight. Until my son walked in, holding the screen that shattered everything. He didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He just walked away and told his father everything. This is my confession. Not about lust or love, but about the silence I broke in my own home. I knew the moment he walked into the room. There was something in his silence that wasn't silence at all. It was heavy, hot with the weight of things a child should never carry. His 12-year-old frame stood frozen in the doorway of our kitchen, holding the iPad he almost never let out of his grip. His eyes didn't meet mine, and when I finally looked up from the sink and asked, "Everything okay, buddy?" He just placed the tablet on the counter, face down. I don't remember how long I stared at it before I picked it up. The screen was dark, but my hands were already shaking. I knew. Somewhere in my stomach, in that place where dread lives before your mind catches up, I already knew. He had seen something. And whatever it was, he understood more than he should have. My husband, Mark, was upstairs. It was Saturday. He'd just come back from coaching Mason's soccer team. I had pretended I wasn't feeling well, skipped the game, and stayed home. The truth was that I'd spent the morning at a hotel off the freeway. With someone else. Someone I told myself meant nothing. And now my son knew. He didn't say a word, just turned and left the kitchen. The air felt thick behind him. I stood there like my body had forgotten how to move. I knew better than to chase him. Not yet. I needed to see what he saw. When I tapped the screen, the photo was already pulled up. Me. Wearing the same clothes I had on now. Leaning into a man whose face was only half visible. But mine? Mine was unmistakable. Smiling, intimate, captured. It must have been from the hotel parking lot. Maybe the driver took it without realizing. Maybe someone else caught it and uploaded it where kids scroll through everything, all the time. TikTok, Instagram, Threads. My son had found it. And he hadn't even come to me first. He went to his father. I didn't know that then. Not for another hour. All I knew was that he had seen the truth I had spent 6 months burying. And once a child sees that truth in their parent, there's no going back. 6 months earlier, I wouldn't have recognized myself in that photo. Mark and I weren't unhappy. We were just quiet, predictable, tired. Marriage with a kid, a mortgage, and 2 jobs doesn't leave much room for thrill, for surprise. We weren't angry or distant. We were just managing, living next to each other instead of with each other. I wasn't looking for anything when it started. Not really. It was just one of those accidental reconnections. A message from an old friend. Someone I hadn't seen since college. A coffee that turned into lunch. Then another. Then conversations that felt lighter than anything I'd had in years. Someone who saw me as a woman, not a mom, not a wife. Just me. It didn't feel dangerous at first. It felt like breathing again. I told myself I could handle it, that I needed the outlet, that every marriage has blind spots, and this was mine. Brief, contained, safe. I was wrong. The man's name was Tyler. He was kind. Too kind. He asked questions Mark hadn't asked in years, and I answered them all. Not just with words, but with parts of myself I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. It didn't get physical until the 3rd month. And when it did, I told myself it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. And I stopped counting after the 5th time. We never talked about what it meant. He never asked me to leave my husband. I never offered. It just became its own world. Hidden. Detached from everything else. A compartment I opened and closed with rehearsed ease. I had gotten good at pretending. Until that Saturday. Until my son looked at me like I was a stranger. When Mark came downstairs an hour later, I knew he knew. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood in the doorway, the same way our son had, and asked one question. Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't answer. He nodded once, turned, and walked back up the stairs. And that was when I knew the affair was no longer a secret. It was a fracture running through the center of my family, and our son had been the one to split it open. Looking back now, I realize how easy it is to mistake routine for peace, to confuse stillness with safety. We weren't broken. We weren't even bruised. Mark and I were just two people doing what we thought we were supposed to do: raise our son, pay our bills, hold each other up when things got heavy. And they did get heavy, often. But we carried the weight like any good couple would, quietly. We met in our late 20s, married fast. I got pregnant within a year. Mason was born a little early, a little small, but with a full head of dark hair that made the nurses laugh. Mark held him first. He looked at me and whispered, "This is it. Our real life starts now." And it did, in all the ways that matter. We bought a small 2-bedroom in a quiet cul-de-sac. Mark worked in logistics, and I went part-time at a marketing agency so I could be home with Mason after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We had taco nights on Thursdays, movie nights on Sundays, traditions that made us feel steady, rooted. But stability has a shadow. When everything runs on time, when no one is yelling or storming out or sleeping on the couch, it becomes easy to assume things are fine. And maybe they were. Maybe we were just two good people doing our best, and somewhere in the quiet of our schedule, I started to disappear from myself. There was no big fight. No betrayal before the betrayal. Just a slow erosion. I stopped getting dressed for the day unless I had to leave the house. Stopped putting on makeup. Mark never complained. He'd just kiss my forehead in the morning, tell me I was beautiful, and head out the door. I smiled every time. But inside, I felt like a ghost version of the woman I used to be. Somewhere along the way, our conversations became transactional. Did you call the plumber? Can you pick up Mason from practice? We need to figure out the budget for next month. We weren't fighting. We just weren't seeing each other. And then one day, a message popped up in my email. It was Tyler. We hadn't spoken since graduation, but he had stumbled on a piece I wrote for a local magazine and reached out to say how proud he was. Harmless, right? I wrote back. It started with shared memories, old jokes. He asked about my work, my family. I asked about his. He was divorced. No kids. Lived one town over. He said he always wondered what happened to me. Those kinds of messages have weight. The first coffee was innocent. I even told Mark about it. Said it was just a quick catch-up with someone from the past. Mark nodded. Didn't ask questions. I think that made it easier to lie to myself later, because it started with permission. The second time, I didn't tell him. Tyler remembered details. Things about me I hadn't thought about in years. He brought up the scar on my wrist from a hiking trip we took with friends in college. Said he used to think it made me look like a warrior. Mark had never asked about that scar. That's how it starts. Not with desire, with attention. I never planned to sleep with him. I wasn't looking to fall into anything. I just wanted to feel something different, something alive. The first time it got physical was in the back of his car after a walk through the park. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even that good. But afterward, when he touched my cheek and said, "I missed this," I felt something twist inside me. Not guilt, relief. Like a door had opened and I wasn't ready to close it. I went home and made dinner like always. Mark complimented the pasta. Mason told me about a project at school. We sat at the table like we always did, and I smiled like I wasn't slowly unraveling into someone else. It didn't feel dangerous. Not yet. It just felt secret. And in a life full of routines and responsibilities, the secret felt sacred. It's strange, isn't it? How you can live two lives so cleanly. So convincingly. I didn't even realize I had built a second version of myself until I started to feel more real in it than I did in my own kitchen. And Mason? He didn't suspect a thing. At least not then. But kids always notice more than we think. I kept asking myself how long he'd known. Had it just been that one photo? A single moment captured and misread? Or had there been signs, whispers of suspicion in the way I rushed to check my phone, the way I disappeared for hours under the excuse of errands, the way I laughed at texts I never showed anyone? He never said a word about it before that day, but that silence felt louder now. Like maybe he'd been carrying it for days, weeks. And when I tried to sleep that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes when he left the kitchen. It wasn't just confusion. It was disappointment. Mark hadn't spoken to me since he asked his question and walked upstairs. I didn't try to follow. I didn't have answers, not the kind that make anything better. I stayed on the couch until the house was dark and still, and when I finally made my way to our bedroom, the door was shut. Not locked, just closed. He hadn't done that in years. I slept in Mason's bed that night. He didn't wake up. He'd fallen asleep with the covers pulled to his chin and his arms wrapped around the old stuffed bear he used to take everywhere when he was little. I sat there in the dark, brushing his hair back, trying to figure out if I could undo what he'd seen. The truth is, I couldn't. You can't unsee your mother with another man, even if it's just a picture. Even if the image is blurry, the story unclear. You can't unfeel the betrayal. The next morning, Mark got up early and took Mason out for breakfast. They didn't say a word to me. I watched them drive away from the kitchen window, barefoot, coffee burning my tongue, hands shaking. I didn't know if they were talking about me. I didn't know if Mason had told him more, if Mark had asked. I just knew that the house felt like it belonged to someone else. Tyler texted that afternoon. "Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to bring him into this, but he already was. "No," I typed. "My son saw something." He didn't respond right away. Then, "Do you want to meet?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to fix my marriage. I wanted to hold my son and promise him I was still his mother. I wanted to take back every moment that led me here. But most of all, I wanted this not to be real. I didn't meet Tyler that day. I didn't even reply again. I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning a house that wasn't messy, just to feel like I was doing something. When Mark and Mason came back, they were quieter than usual. Mark went straight upstairs. Mason dropped his backpack in the hallway and stood there, not looking at me. Just standing. I bent down slowly. "Hey, you want to talk to me?" He shook his head. "You mad at me?" He hesitated, then nodded. That broke me. I reached for him, but he stepped back. Not violently, not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to let me know that whatever wall had been built between us, he wasn't ready to cross it yet. And I deserved that. I went to Mark that night. I waited until Mason was asleep, then knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Can we talk?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yeah." I stepped inside. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. His phone was in his hand, but the screen was dark. "Did he tell you everything?" I asked. He nodded. He showed me the photo. Silence. "He thought you were being hurt, that maybe someone forced you. He didn't want to believe what it looked like." My throat closed. "I would never—" "I know," Mark said. "But he's 12. He doesn't understand nuance. He just knows his mom is hugging someone who isn't his dad." I sat down beside him. I never wanted to hurt him. Or you. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And what I saw there wasn't anger. It was something worse. Distance. "How long?" "6 months, on and off." He exhaled slowly. Why? And I said the only thing I knew to be true. Because I forgot who I was. And he reminded me. It wasn't an excuse. It was just the truth. And Mark didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed the version of me he didn't want to believe existed. I need time, he said. I understand. He stood. Mason needs answers too. That was the part that hurt most, because I didn't know how to explain to my son what I'd done. How do you explain that love and loyalty don't always walk the same path? That sometimes people who love you still do terrible things? That sometimes moms lie too? In the days that followed, I tried to return to the version of me they both remembered. I made breakfast early again. Eggs the way Mason liked, overcooked with ketchup. I checked his homework, laid out his clothes, asked about his day with a kind of attentiveness that felt like a performance I'd lost the right to give. With Mark, I kept things light. I gave him space. No expectations, no questions, just presence. But the air in our house had changed. It wasn't loud or tense. It was quiet in that heavy way, like the calm after a storm when everything's still soaked and dripping. No one wants to talk about the wind anymore, but the windows are still broken. Mason spoke to me when he had to, but not the way he used to. No random stories, no excited interruptions about new video games or school jokes. Just answers. Polite, hesitant, measured. The morning after Mark and I had talked, really talked, he slept on the couch. I didn't ask him to come back to bed, and he didn't offer. There was something fragile in that silence that we both honored. Like if either of us pushed too hard, the whole structure would collapse. I kept telling myself that if I could just show them I was still me. Still the woman who read bedtime stories, who showed up to soccer games, who remembered anniversaries and packed lunches. Maybe the other version of me would fade. But she didn't, because she had lived in me for 6 months. She had a name, a voice, a memory, and pretending she never existed only made me feel more split in half. Tyler texted again. I didn't answer. I didn't delete the message either. That says everything, doesn't it? One night, about a week later, Mason came into the kitchen while I was unloading the dishwasher. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me stack plates in silence. I turned around and smiled carefully. Hey, bud. He didn't smile back. Then he asked, Do you still love Dad? The question hit like a stone to the chest. I nodded slowly. Yes, I do. Then why did you hug that man? I closed the dishwasher. I wanted to say something that made sense. Something that could be understood through the lens of a child's mind, where right and wrong still have borders. But there was no version of that answer that made me feel like a mother worth forgiving. I made a mistake, I said. A really big one. He didn't reply. I never stopped loving Dad, I said again, softer. But I did something that hurt him, and it hurt you too. I know that. He looked down. I didn't want to tell him. I know. I just didn't know what else to do. I understand. You did the right thing. And I meant that. With every shattered piece of my heart. I stepped forward, slowly, gently. Can I give you a hug? He didn't move for a second. Then he nodded. And when he wrapped his arms around me, it was tight. Not the kind of hug he gave when he was distracted or rushing. It was the kind he used to give when he was scared, when he needed to know he was safe. I held him for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't say sorry again. I just held my son and tried to remember who I was before I became a stranger in his eyes. Mark came back to our bed the next night. He didn't say anything, just climbed in quietly, turned off the light, and lay beside me. We didn't touch. We didn't talk. But his presence, The decision to return to that space said more than words. In the dark, I whispered, "Thank you." He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. And in that moment, it was enough. Because forgiveness, I was learning, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the act of staying. Mason had started speaking to me again. Not just the practical things. "What's for dinner?" Or, "Can you sign this permission slip?" But real conversations. Small at first. Quiet. But they were there. One afternoon, he came home from school and told me about a group project he was working on. He was frustrated about one of the boys who never helped. I offered to listen. He talked for 15 minutes straight. And when he finished, he smiled. Just a little. But it was real. It felt like something had cracked open again. Not all the way, but enough to let some light in. I clung to those moments like lifelines. I had no illusions about being forgiven. Not really. But I thought, maybe this was the beginning of something salvageable. A new version of our family. One with scars, yes, but still together. Then he asked about the man. It was a Thursday night. We had just finished dinner. Mark had gone upstairs to take a call, some late client issue, and I was clearing the plates. Mason sat at the table, twirling the last bite of broccoli with his fork. I remember thinking he seemed peaceful. Then he looked up. "Is he still around?" I froze. "What?" "The man from the picture." I set the plate down too hard. It clattered, but didn't break. "I just want to know," Mason said. I turned to him slowly. "Number he's not. I haven't seen him in a long time." That was technically true. A few weeks felt like forever in the timeline of grief and regret. Mason nodded like he understood. Then, "Was he your boyfriend?" The question landed harder than it should have. "No," I said. "No, honey, he wasn't. It wasn't that." "But you liked him?" I didn't know how to answer that, because anything I said would create a shape in Mason's mind. A story he'd carry about me, about love, about trust. And I couldn't control what he'd take from it. "I liked how he made me feel," I said carefully. "But it wasn't love, and it wasn't worth hurting you and your dad." He was quiet for a long time. Then, in the smallest voice, "Did you love him more than Dad?" I walked over and knelt beside him. Number not for 1 second. He looked at me, eyes wide and wet. "Then why did you do it?" And that question, asked not in anger but in heartbreak, was the hardest thing I had ever been asked. Because there was no version of the truth that would feel fair to him. "I made a mistake," I said. "I forgot what mattered. I let myself believe I needed something else. And I was wrong." He nodded slowly, but I could see the weight of it in his face, the kind of weight kids shouldn't have to carry. "I just don't want you to do it again," he whispered. "I won't," I said. "I promise." I don't know if he believed me, but he let me hug him. And in that moment, it felt like the closest thing to grace I would ever receive. That night, Mark and I talked again. Not a fight. Not even a confrontation. Just a slow, tired unraveling of everything we hadn't said yet. He asked if it was over. I told him yes. He asked if it had been going on while we were still together. I nodded. He asked if I had feelings for Tyler, and I said, "Not anymore." He looked at me, eyes clouded. "But you did?" I didn't answer, and he didn't press. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "I'm not leaving." My heart caught. "You're not?" "I'm angry," he said. "I'm hurt. I feel like I don't even know who you are. But Mason, he needs both of us, and I don't think I'm ready to throw everything away. Not yet." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry. Because that wasn't relief. That was reality. Staying meant work, pain, rebuilding from a place where nothing felt steady. But it also meant hope, and right now that was more than I deserved. Time didn't heal anything. Not really. But it softened the edges. That's the part no one tells you, that some betrayals don't explode. They settle. They expand in the background like a slow leak. You can't hear the hissing, but you feel the pressure change in the room. It's been almost 7 months now. Tyler never reached out again. And I never reached out to him. I deleted the texts, the photos, even the contacts. But he still lives somewhere in the back of my memory. Not as a person, but as a moment. A fracture. A fault line I walk carefully now every single day. Mark stayed, true to his word. But staying isn't the same as forgiving. And forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. We're not the same. Not as a couple. Not as a family. And I don't think we ever will be. There are moments, quick, quiet ones, when things feel like they used to. A glance across the dinner table when Mason makes a dumb joke. Mark's hand grazing mine when we both reach for the TV remote. The way he still says drive safe every time I leave the house, like muscle memory. But then there are other moments. When I catch him looking at me like he's still trying to decide who I really am. When he hesitates before answering a question I wouldn't have had to ask before. When we're intimate. And yes, we have been. And I feel a distance in the way he touches me. Not cold, not resentful. Just measured. Like he's keeping a part of himself behind a door I no longer have the key to. And I get it. I broke something. And even if it was glued back together, it still bears the cracks. Mason's doing better too. He doesn't ask about Tyler anymore, but I know he still thinks about it. Sometimes I catch him watching me when I don't realize he's in the room, like he's trying to make sense of who I am now, who I was before. We talk more now, about everything. Not just the safe stuff, but the hard stuff too. About trust, about mistakes, about the difference between being sorry and being better. He asked me once if I ever thought about leaving, about running off with that guy. I told him the truth. I never wanted a different life. I just didn't know how to live inside my own anymore. He didn't answer, but he nodded, like that made sense in the only way it could. I know I've changed the way he sees me. I know I've taken something from him he'll never get back. That soft certainty that your parents are the good guys. That they'll always do the right thing. But maybe what I've given him, painfully, unintentionally, is the truth. That people are complicated. That love doesn't always protect us from our worst impulses. And that sometimes, even the people who love you the most, mess up terribly. I can only hope he becomes better than me because of it. We still live in the same house. Mark and I went to counseling for a while. Quietly. No announcements. Just Tuesday nights, sitting in an office with a woman who never judged either of us, but who always asked the questions that made us squirm. It helped. Not magically, but enough. We don't talk about Tyler anymore. He's become a footnote, a lesson, a name that no longer needs to be spoken to be remembered. I've made peace with the fact that I'll carry this for the rest of my life. I don't expect redemption. I don't think I deserve it, but I do try, every day, to be honest now. About what I feel, about what I need, about where I failed. Because silence was the soil where the betrayal grew. And I'll never water it again. We're still a family, just not the same one we were. But maybe in some strange, broken way, we're stronger now, because we've seen the worst. And we're still standing.